Ghana's parliament has approved new tax measures expected to raise an additional $340 million in revenue in a bid to meet requirements for the International Monetary Fund's $3 billion bailout program. In a tight vote, Ghana's hung parliament passed the measure 137 to 136. The bills would increase some income taxes and corporate taxes, as well as the excise duty on cigarettes and various alcoholic, including sweetened beverages. Ghana is restructuring most of its public debt, which stood at about 575.7 billion cedis, talking about $47 billion at the end of November, to qualify for the IMF support package. The taxes will help facilitate IMF approval for the funding after bilateral creditors give the necessary financial assurances. Ghana is now targeting an agreement by the end of April after the March deadline was missed. Now, is there a second chance for Africa's gold top producer? We get to find out from our guest, who is Patrick Abankwa, a financial analyst and investment consultant from Accra, Ghana. Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Now, these new tax measures is targeted or expected to raise about $340 million in revenue. Can it actually achieve the prospects?
Yeah, so the possibility of the new tax achieving the target of $340 million is possible. I think it's possible if government put in place the right measures in terms of its implementation. If you put out a tax that is rejected by the people, then it means that you are forcing people to find ways and means to evade the tax. So that is where the challenge will be from. And I believe that government, if they want to really achieve this target, must begin to engage stakeholders. And I know that since the tax was approved, the Ministry of Finance and other ministries have started engaging some stakeholders to ensure that the compliance to this tax is reached at its fullest. So if the 100% expectation is met, then this target, as I said, can be met and we'll be able to present it to IMF by way of a way around the deal that we want to have with IMF.
Now, economists are actually worried about the percentage difference because looking at the new tax bill, it is set to include 1% increase on value-added tax and 1% increase in the national health insurance levy. So let's be realistic. How significant do you think this percentage difference would mean or be to the $340 million targets?
So when you look at the 1% on VAT, it means that if we are looking at a production which is expected to grow at, let's say, 10%, that 1% is a huge margin in terms of the revenue that we can rake in as a country. When it comes to the NHIL, which is the National Health Insurance Bill, this is a tax that is paid by almost everyone that works in the formal sector. So it's not like a tax that people can actually evade. When you consolidate this together with other taxes that the government introduced during the budget last year, I think that the target that they are setting for themselves is possible. As I said, it's all based on compliance and effective enforcement. If we are able to combine the compliance where people accept the tax and also ensure that effectively we are enforcing the law, then I think that the target that government has set is possible and is achievable.
But parliamentarians say that, or they say that they believe that this particular new tax measure is a huge step to securing the $3 billion bailout program they're hoping to secure from the IMF. Do you also agree with their stance?
Yes, so I believe that it's actually a conditionality from IMF in terms of securing the $3 billion loan. So IMF presented some conditions to Ghana. One was that we needed to bring down our debt, which includes the local, that's the domestic debt, and the foreign debt. At the moment, the domestic debt restructuring program has ended. Government is now with some of the external debt holders to ensure that they bring the debt by extending the duration to give government the space to get more money to do infrastructure projects. The third one has to do with ensuring that we are raking in enough revenue. And the revenue that government is trying to rake in has to do with taxes. And so that's why the government had to push their way to Parliament to ensure that these 3 taxes were approved last week for them to present it as a roadmap to IMF. And for me, once they send it to IMF and the external debtors also come on board, then we are beginning to see a leeway by way of agreeing to their deal and also receiving some kind of funds and approval from IMF by the end of this month.
Let's quickly look at the taxes. Now, we're talking about income taxes, corporate taxes for individuals and corporate businesses. No, in a country where the citizens are actually struggling to earn a living and the economy is not as strong, as formidable as it used to be, do you think there could be other means by which the government can reach its revenue targets other than increasing the percentage on taxes to be paid?
To be honest with you, where I sit, I think government has exhausted all its possible means of raising revenue. Of course, there has been calls for government to reduce the expenditure that it incurs on the government expense itself. So by way of people, the ministers around, the number of MPs, the number of people working in the various ministries, there has been that call for government to cut down on such employment expenses. So that is one of the areas that government could have looked at. But of course, we're looking at the growth of the country this year. You don't foresee any other thing to do than to increase taxes, which for me will bring negative impact on the economy, because if you are increasing taxes, corporate taxes, it means that corporate institutions are now going to pay more by way of tax, which will also impact on their profitability. And if it impacts on their profitability, it has negative repercussions for issues relating to employment, job security, and all of that. So government, because of consistent policies that have not yielded the desired result, is in a position that they are tied up. And for that matter, these are the only avenues that they can go for. For me, some of these avenues are things that they should have done in the past. But once IMF conditions are now pushing them, there's no way around it for them to just adhere to it.
All right. Well, aside Ghana's efforts, we know that it is doing a lot to see to the debt restructuring process that it is subjected to. But then, of course, we know that debt restructuring has to do with appealing to the lenders to reduce interest rates and, of course, to extend the time by which the liabilities are due to be paid. Now, what is the stance or the position of this international monetary these international lenders, as it were, in terms of the ongoing talks as regards restructuring Ghana's debt?
So in terms of the local debt, as I said, that has been concluded. Government achieved about.
Hello, Patrick.
I know the minister was in China. China, we owe them huge volume in terms of the amount that we need to try and restructure. The minister was there to meet their finance minister and all of that. Discussions that has come out of that shows that the signs are positive. So on that score, you can foresee that the external debt restructuring can also go forward, and we are expecting some positive results either this week or next week, because the Chinese Prime Minister and the Finance Minister has already issued a communique to show that they are working with government to ensure that they will put the economy back on track. So with that kind of information and other engagement that the government is having on the Eurobond market, I think that we should expect some good news by way of engagement that will be concluded before the IMF deal is sorted.
Patrick, let me just quickly be sure about your claim. Now, as of December last year, it was reported that Ghana had not yet laid out a strategy for its foreign debt, which includes $13 billion of Eurobonds traded at less than 50 cents on the dollar for months. So I'd like to know if that has been addressed, if Ghana has actually done that, because that is said to be another major step to clinching the $3 billion bailout.
Okay, so from where I sit as an analyst, the strategy is not too clear from my side because government has not made it very public. It's not public information. However, looking at the steps that government has taken, especially after the end of the domestic debt, which the government said they wanted to tackle after the domestic debt, and the news that are coming out from especially China and the American market, I think that we still have a chance of securing the IMF bailout. As to whether the strategy is clear enough, as I said, the ministry has not made it public. So we can only assume that things are going to work out based on the news that we are hearing from the Ministry of Finance, the assurances that we are hearing from the Chinese government and all of that. So that's what I would say by way of a strategy. I believe that the ministry has a strategy, and perhaps they are in constant communication with IMF on the state that we are in now. And I believe that if the state process goes on as expected, then we should begin to hear some good news from there. Ministry of Finance.
All right. But finally, Patrick, Ghana actually missed the deadline for March and actually set a deadline for April. You are showing a bit of optimism, but we understand by authority that some investors are not too optimistic about the IMF deal, and they're saying that there's a possibility that Ghana might not meet up with the deadline. But then I'd like to know how sure you are in terms of meeting up with the April deadline in terms of what Ghana is hoping to achieve with the bailout.
Okay, so I think the deadline that we need to meet by way of April, for me, is not just in the interest of government, but also in the interest of the investors. Because if government is not able to meet the agreement with IMF, what it means is that with time, government is going to default on some of the repayment that they have to engage in. So government at this point will have to ensure that they go into extensive collaborative discussions with some of these investors and let them know the prospects that will happen when the deal is on. I believe that what is happening now is more of miscommunication and not flow of information. When people are not given enough information, that is where they begin to speculate, and once they speculate, they are not likely to agree to certain deals. So where we are now, government should see the April deadline as crucial, and for that matter, whatever be the engagement that they need to have with external debtors, and also some leeways that they need to make for external debtors portable, that is where and what they need to do at the moment, so that the April deadline will be met and Ghana's economy will be back on track, so that the citizens and the economy and businesses in the country will begin to shoot up again by way of expanding to meet their expectations.
All right, so we'll just keep up with the optimism for Ghana and hope that that can bring about some sort of economic growth for the country and see to the reduction in the country's debt burden. Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us.
Thank you very much.